Are you guys ready for the next installment of the Merrymakers Handmade Christmas? We are almost there, people. We are almost to Christmas 2025. I can't tell you how ready I am for it to be over, to be honest with you. I have been pushing out videos for Christmas tutorials. I have been making things for Christmas gifts, and it just seems like the ball is never going to stop rolling. It has been the longest month of the entire year, and I just noticed my dog is outside on the road, so I'm going to have to go get him back inside. It's been pure chaos around here. Anyway, this week's tutorial is going to be for this nifty little burrito here. This is the new Cord Keeper 2.0, and what it is it's a quilted little trifold cord keeper. So it has an elastic band that goes around it. It is a trifold little pouch, if you will, that's got elastic bands to keep all of your charging cords organized and ready to go. We travel a whole lot. We are annual pass holders for Disney World and DVC members, so we go to Disney probably 4 or 5 times a year. This year, 2025, we've literally traveled at least once every single month for work or for Disney or on a vacation or whatever. So we keep a whole set of cords in our luggage for our phones, our iPads, our AirPods, all of the things that need to be charged. We have an entire bag dedicated to chargers that stay in our suitcases so that we're never without a charging cord. But I had the idea because my kids never seem to have a charger. And so I thought for Christmas, I would buy them all maybe 3 or 4 charging cords for their phones, especially, one to keep in the car, one to keep in their bedroom, one to keep in their living rooms at their house or their apartments. And then I thought I would make them each one of these so that whenever they decide to travel, they can pack up their cords or get a whole set of cords for travel too. So it is a cute little quilted travel cord organizer, whatever you want to call it. It's got elastic loops in here, so you can put lots of different cords in here. Now, you could also use this for things like small makeup brushes or crayons for kids to take with coloring books to restaurants. You could use it for paintbrushes for art supplies. You could use it for colored pencils. You could use this for just about anything, but this time we're going to use it for cords. And it just folds up into a little trifold pouch here. It's got a great little elastic band that you're never going to lose, so it's going to stay closed when you toss it in your bag, and the elastic is pretty tight so your cords aren't going to fall out. So if you guys are ready to whip some of these up for Christmas gifts or just because you might need one in your travel bag too, stay tuned and I'm going to show you what all you need to make this. Okay, the supplies that you're going to need for this little project for our Cord Keeper 2.0, because I have a Cord Keeper, I guess it's 1.0 pattern also on my website, you're going to need the pattern, of course. You can find this at buythebagbagco.com and download it, print it out, prints out on a PDF. So you're going to need that. You're also going to need some quilting cotton. So I've chosen 2 different colors. This one's super cute. It was a little fat quarter with little mice on it. Got it at Joann's. Rest in peace, Joann's. It's a lot of my supply. I'm using a lot of my supplies and stash that I've had at from Joann's. But these both came from fat quarters, so this is a super scrappy project. Makes great little stocking stuffers. You're going to need some quilt batting. You can use regular polyester quilt batting. I just happened to have a little piece that was the perfect size of cotton quilt batting. You're also going to need some elastic. This is, I think I got this pack at Walmart. But you can find elastic at any craft store. This one is 1/2 inch elastic. This is what's going to keep all those cords tucked neatly in this cord keeper. You're also going to need some bias tape or some fabric strips that you made for binding. It does have to go around some curves, so bias tape would work better because it's cut on the bias of the fabric, so it kind of stretches a little bit when you go around a curve, so it kind of hugs those curves a little bit better. This is a vintage pack of bias tape that I bought a big box of bias tape at an estate sale one time for $5, and there was like 50 rolls of bias tape and binding in there, and so a lot of them are vintage that were from like TGNY and other craft stores from way back when, and they were priced at like, the little price tags on them said like 15 cents. So definitely vintage. But you'll need some sort of bias tape or binding that you've cut from your strips. I do have a free download on my website for how to make magic bias tape from a square of fabric. So check that out if you want to do that. You're going to need some pins or clips, probably pins, because you're going to have to do some stuff in the center of this. So you'll need pins. You need paper scissors to cut out your pattern, fabric only scissors to cut out your fabric. You're going to need a marking pen that will disappear. So this is a friction pen. They're readily available at like any store that sells office supplies. The good thing about these is they're erasable, but on fabric, you just have to iron over it and they disappear. So I love friction pens. And then the other thing that I suggest getting that will make marking the quilting lines on this easier is something that you're going to find in the sewing section. And I don't really see a lot of people talking about this anymore when I'm perusing all the sewing TikToks or on YouTube and stuff. But you're going to need a tracing wheel and some tracing chalk paper. So what this is it's paper that's got chalk on it. So this one is blue. They come in a lot of different colors. And then you have this little wheel. Let's see if I don't know if you can see. It's a little wheel and it's got little spikes on it. And what this does is you put the blue side down on your fabric, you roll the wheel over what you're tracing. We're going to do that in just a minute. And it'll put chalk lines on your fabric. And then usually when you sew over them or you just dust them off, the chalk lines disappear. So that, I think, plus your sewing machine, all that stuff, typical stuff for sewing this project. So I think that's all you're going to need for this project. So let's get started. All right, now that we have all of our supplies together, let's get started. First thing you're going to do is cut out your fabric a little bit bigger than your pattern piece. So you just want it just, you know, I don't know, an inch all the way around, just a little bit bigger than your pattern piece, fabric and your batting. And now we're going to transfer the lines, the dotted lines that are on your pattern to your lining fabric. And so we're going to use the chalk transfer paper for that. So I'm going to take my pattern piece and I'm going to pin one side of it down. That way it doesn't shift whenever I'm lifting it up to move this around, and that way all of my lines are in the correct place, because this little piece of chalk paper is not quite as wide as my pattern piece. So I'm gonna have to do it in sections, and this way I can just lift this up and put this back down and it's all in the same spot. So I'm going to tuck this in here, and I'm going to take my little wheel and I'm just going to roll over this, and it's going to transfer the dotted lines onto my lining fabric. You want to make sure that you have the colored side of the chalk paper touching your fabric. So we're just going to roll back and forth, and it's going to make a line. So you can lift that up and check and make sure that it made a line. You're not going to be able to see that from here, but it made a little blue line on there. You can go over it a couple of times to make sure it's nice and dark. And then you're just going to do that to each one of these lines on here. And then whenever you need to lift it up to move this transfer paper over some, that way your pattern's not shifting around and all your lines are going to be in the correct place. Okay, so we're going to put that away for right now. It will get all over your fingers, so be careful how much you touch it and then touch your fabric, because the chalk will get everywhere. I'm also going to take my friction pen and I'm going to trace the outline of my pattern piece on here. Okay, and I'm checking to make sure I have all of my lines on here. So this is kind of what the chalk lines look like. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not. They're very faint, so it's kind of hard to see on this fabric on camera, but when you're sewing, you'll definitely be able to see them. The other thing that you're going to need to transfer are these little star marks. This is where our elastic is going to be placed at. So just transfer those little dots on there. And then you can set your pattern piece aside, and then we're going to take our first two pieces of elastic that we've cut, and we're going to lay them across where those dots are, and they're going to go parallel on there. So I'm just going to pin that right along the edge. And then you're going to do the second one, so they make two parallel lines on here. And you want your elastic to go a little bit past your the edge where you drew the edge or outline to the pattern. Obviously need some more coffee this morning. Okay, now we're going to take our outside fabric. Make sure if you have a directional print that it's going the correct way, so all my little mice are facing the right way. Then we're going to sandwich our quilt batting on top of that, and then we're going to put our lining piece that we've transferred all the marks on top of that, and kind of line everything up to where we make sure that the outline is going to fit on all the pieces. And then we're going to pin through all of the layers, making our little sandwich here. And I'm going to add some pins kind of all over this. You're going to end up quilting each one of these dotted lines that we did, and you're going to sew over this elastic. So you can pin through the elastic to make sure that it's staying going parallel across. But whenever I'm quilting something like this, I like to add lots of pins. That way I make sure that my fabrics don't shift and everything kind of stays in place. You could also use some quilt basting spray if you want to, but you definitely need to add some pins on the elastic to make sure that it's going to stay in place. So you should end up with a little sandwich. This is the outside, this is the inside. All of our lines have been transferred on here. So now we're going to take this over the sewing machine and we're going to quilt all of those lines. And you're going to want to be sure to start off of the outline of your pattern piece. So I know you can't see the lines. So let's say my outline is here. You're going to start off up here and go all the way off down here. That way you make sure each one of these quilting lines goes all the way off the edge. So when we baste around the edge and trim it, your quilting lines will go all the way through it. So let's go over the sewing machine and get this going. This is a super quick project once you get going. It's just prep work that takes a little bit of time. Okay, here's a little bit of a closer view. I don't know if you can see the outlines or not, but we're going to start off of our outline, go all the way down this line, all the way off the outline down here. We're going to sew over this elastic. So it's going to create little elastic loops on here for our cords. So I'm just going to find this first chalk line and I'm just going to sew right down that line, moving my pins out of the way as I go. And you'll want to hold your elastic to make sure it's going to go straight across when you sew over it so you don't get like wonky elastic. And we're going all the way off past where we outlined. So you're going to end up with a line like this. Now I'm going to go and do all of the lines that I traced. Okay, now that we have all of our lines sewn, that's what it looks like on the elastic side. So see, it created all these little loops for you to put your cords down in, and then the outside looks like that. Now we're going to take this and we're going to sew right along this line that we traced when we outlined our pattern. And you're going to sew over the ends of the elastic. so we went all the way around. I'm going to trim up some of these threads that are kind of in the way. And now we're going to take our scissors and we're going to trim just on the outside of this outline. Okay, now we have our shape. Clean up those threads. So there is our shape. Now we're going to bind the outside. So eventually it's going to fold over like this to keep all of our cords inside here in the loops. So let me go get my bias tape. Okay, so this is a package of bias tape. This one is a double fold bias tape, which means that the edges are folded into the center and then it's folded in half again. And this one technically says that it is the extra wide double fold bias tape, but there is one that's wider than this, so I'm not sure why this, because this is like the normal size. So I don't really know why they call this one extra wide. So we're going to pull some off the spool. And to start out with, we're going to open this up and we're going to fold this edge in and crease it. You can just crease it with your fingernails or you can iron it, either way. And that's going to give us a finished edge at the beginning. And I'm going to start down here at the bottom and we're going to open this up and I'm going to clip this going all the way around. Get that more in the center. And we're going to clip this going all the way around. And then we're going to sew right along this crease line right here. So what that's going to do is it's going to sew this down this way. So then when we wrap it around, it'll meet up on the other side, right about at that same spot. I'm going to grab a whole bunch of clips and I'm going to clip this all the way around and then I'll show you how to overlap the other end when we get there. Okay, I've clipped it all the way around. We're back at the beginning where we started with that fold. And I'm just going to overlap it about an inch or so and trim that off. And when we start sewing it, we're just going to pull this back out of the way and start right here. And then when we get to the end, we'll overlap this and line everything up so that when we fold it back this way, we'll have a finished edge in there. So just leave that loose for right now. So now I'm going to take this over to the machine and I'm going to sew right along this crease. All right, we're going to back stitch at the beginning. And we're just going to follow that crease. Now when you get to the corners, because they're rounded, you're going to want to go very slowly and make sure you don't have any folds in here. So I like to do about 2 stitches, and then I can use my stiletto too to help hold this down so my fingers don't get close to the needles. So I do 2 stitches at a time, and I kind of pivot a little bit and then do another stitch and just kind of move this out of the way as I'm going. And then that way my curve is straight and smooth and I'm not getting any folds up in there. So I'm going to finish sewing this all the way around and I'll show you when we get to this end. Okay, we're coming into the home stretch down here at the other end. So you're just going to keep on sewing. And then when you get down here close, you're going to make sure this is still folded all nice and straight right here. You're going to overlap this one and line up this crease and make sure it's all lined up straight. And just keep sewing over to the end. And then back stitch. So let me trim these threads off of this side. So now when we go to fold this back the other way, we'll have a finished edge right here. You may need to trim a little bit around the corners. Like this corner, I didn't get like super straight and close to this corner. That's okay. Just trim a little bit off, or you can unpick this and see if you can get it sewn a little straighter if you want to. The other thing that we need to do is add our third loop in here, and this is how we're going to end up keeping this little cord keeper closed. So you're going to take your third piece of elastic and you're going to baste this edge closed. And then on the outside, you're going to line this up with this top strip of elastic, and it's going to go on the outside, and you're going to baste it on like this. So the loop is going towards this direction. I just basted right over these stitches right here. So I'm just going to hold that in place. And I'm just going to baste that in right where I already sewed this bias tape on to hold it in place. You can do it while you're doing the bias tape if you want to. I forgot to clip mine in there. So either way, just add that in. Okay, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to trim some of my seam allowance so that when I go to fold this over, I've got a nice, clean, straight edge. I think most of it will work. This corner might give me a little bit of a problem right here. Yeah. So I'm just going to trim a little bit of that off. I need to trim a little bit of the bulk right here out too. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to take this and we're going to fold this over towards the front of our pouch. So I like to get this kind of lined up because see when it's like this, it's not going to lay flat and straight on the other side. So I like to get it all lined up before I fold this over to the front. So you're going to pull this binding down to where it's nice and flat right here and not bunched up like that. So nice and flat. And you could take it over to your iron and iron it out if you wanted to. We're going to fold this edge in and fold it over. This is why it's a double fold bias tape, so that our little folded beginning is nice and straight. And now we're going to need some more of these clips. And we're going to clip this on going all the way around. You just want to make sure that you have it pulled to where it's pulled all the way flat or pulled all the way out. I don't know what you would call that. So I like to do all the straight edges first and then go back and kind of ease in around the curves there on the corners. And once you get going, it'll kind of lay, it'll kind of make itself lay down in place. I decided to switch up the color of binding. I had dark brown binding earlier and I decided to go with this light gray because it matches the little mice on here. And this is why you want bias tape, because it's cut on the bias of the fabric, it gives it a little bit of a stretch so that you can go around curves and it'll kind of hug around that curve nice and tight. If it was cut on the grain line of the fabric, on the sharper curves, it will bunch up. It won't lay really flat. You also want to make sure that this is folding over enough to cover up this first stitch line where we stitched it on. So I just kind of roll this with my fingers to get it to go all the way around. And then you're going to make sure that your elastic is laying flat that way. And we're just going to put the binding right over the elastic, making sure that we're covering up that stitch line. This is where you might have to go back and trim a little bit of that seam allowance so that it will cover. Okay, now when it comes to your corners, you just want to kind of manipulate it to where it's not going to have any creases, bumps, or puckers. It might pucker a little bit in there, but when you're stitching it, you can usually kind of ease that in. So just go slow when you're stitching this. And I think traditionally you're supposed to stitch in the ditch from the back side, meaning we would stitch right along this where we sewed this before from the lining side. But I'm going to top stitch this on because I want the outside of this to look really nice. You could go and hand sew this all the way around with a little whip stitch all the way around, but I'm just going to top stitch on this really close to the edge, and because I'm not too concerned on whether or not that's going to show on the inside of it or not. I'm going to start down here where we joined, and I'm just going to line my presser foot up with the edge of this, because I have an 1/8 of an inch presser foot on my machine, so that gets it an 1/8 of an inch away from this edge. But if you have a regular 1/4 inch presser foot, you're going to want to just kind of sew right along this edge. Okay, now when you're coming to this corner, you can use a stiletto and kind of hold it down and ease it through. And just go slow around the corner. You may need to lift up your presser foot and kind of push that back down a little bit, because sometimes the presser foot will kind of shove that fabric in there. And just do a couple of stitches and then lift it up and pivot. And just smooth it out as you're going. And then see, once you get around that corner, it won't be all puckery and have folds in it. If it does, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. It is sounding like it's about new needle time. I can hear it kind of thunking, which means my needle is getting dull. Make sure I'm covering up all those stitches. You may need to go a little bit slow over all the elastic right there, because it is a little bit bulky. And back stitch at the end. All right, and trim up your threads, and we are done. All right, now I got to go find some cords to put in here. You're going to end up tri-folding this like this. So you may want to take it over to your ironing board and give it a little bit of a press. But then the elastic is going to go around it when you have all the cords in there, and it will keep them all snug in your little Cord Keeper 2.0. So I'm going to go give this a good press, go find some charger cords to put in here, and then I'll show you the final product. Okay, I went and grabbed a couple of my charging cords. I've coiled them up in here. This black one is a 10-foot cord, so I kind of split it up between 2 of the elastic things, and then this other one's like a, I don't know, a 6-foot, 5 or 6 foot lightning cord. So I put that in there. So you just slip them through your little elastic pieces like that, and then you're just going to tri-fold it and wrap the elastic around, and it'll hold them all nice and snug in there like a little charger burrito. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little tutorial. You could whip up a whole bunch of these in one afternoon for a bunch of stocking stuffers, which is what I think I'm going to do for my kids, because they're always asking for cords when they come over here, and they can't ever seem to find a cord, and they never have a cord in their car to charge their phones with. So I think what I'm going to do is buy them like 4 or 5 cords, wrap them up in one of these, and give them one of these in their stockings this year for Christmas. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, all of those YouTube-y things, so we get my videos pushed out to more people who are learning how to sew. And I cannot believe that it has been an entire year since I started doing this. My goal at the beginning of 2025 was to push out one tutorial and one sewing pattern tutorial a week for the entire year. And so I am on target. I think I have 2 more videos to do before the end of December, and it is the second week of December. So we are on target to have 52 beginner sewing patterns on my website this year. So I'm so excited. And pretty much all of them have a video tutorial to go with them because I want it to feel like I'm sitting right there with you, teaching you how to sew. So if for some reason you are just finding me here on YouTube and you just got a sewing machine for this Christmas for 2025, welcome to the club. And now you've got a whole plethora, a whole year's worth of videos and projects to work through. So I'm so excited. I am also starting a Patreon for 2026. I'll be making a video to announce that, where I'll have different tiers on my Patreon, and some will include a new sewing pattern every month. Some will include a quarterly project box where it'll have all of the supplies that you need to make a project in it. And I've got a whole new list of sewing patterns that I'll be designing for 2026 along with my Patreon. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to tag me on all of your social medias. I'm at By the Babe Bag Co. on everything. I would love to see what fabric choices you make and see your combinations that you put together and all of your little projects and stocking stuffers that you're making this year for Christmas.